Between 1933 and 1945, 6 million Jews were murdered by Nazis in what's become known as the Holocaust. As well as Jewish people, gypsies, homosexuals, political opponents and others were also killed. The Holocaust was killing on an industrial scale. It was Hitler's so-called final solution. Nearly 7 out of 10 Jews living in Europe perished. These are historical facts. So why do some people still deny that the Holocaust ever happened? One of the most well-known Holocaust deniers is a man called David Irving. He lost a High Court case, which many of you would have seen is featured in a film that's out at the moment. It's called Denial. The judge found that Irving was an active Holocaust denier, and here's a trailer for the film Denial.
I say to you quite tastelessly that more women died on the back seat of Senator Edward Kennedy's car at Chappaquiddick than ever died in a gas chamber at Auschwitz.
It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Deborah Lipstadt.
Whatever the reasons that people become deniers, they often have an agenda which they won't admit to.
Why do you continually denigrate the work of David Irving?
You can have opinions about the Holocaust, but I won't meet with anyone who says the Holocaust didn't happen.
Professor Lipstadt, I am that David Irving. And I've got $1,000 to give anyone who can show me a document that proves the Holocaust.
I will not debate you, not here, not now, not
Because
ever.
you can't. Well,
Irving's just sent us notice of a suit to be filed in the High Court.
Miss Lipstadt has done very real damage to my professional existence.
What did you say about him?
I think I called him a liar and a falsifier of history.
You better get yourself lawyered up.
A man accuses you of something and it's your job to prove he's wrong. In the U.S., there's a presumption of innocence.
Yeah, not in the UK.
This case is happening to you, but it's not about you.
Auschwitz is at the very centre of Holocaust belief, so it's at the very centre of Holocaust denial.
There were no gas chambers anywhere at Auschwitz.
Here is one of the largest killing machines in human history.
We know what it is, it's how we prove what it is.
What if we lose? Suddenly it becomes acceptable to say the Holocaust didn't happen?
The word denier is particularly evil.
Well, freedom of speech means you can say whatever you want.
The phrase is a poison to which there is no antidote.
What you can't do is lie and expect not to be accountable for it.
There are no holes in that roof. Therefore, there never were any gas chambers.
No holes, no Holocaust. He wanted a catchy phrase. He's got it.
Where's the evidence? Where's the proof?
Not all opinions are equal.
But I'm not a racist.
The earth is round, the ice caps are melting, and
Elvis, it's not a lie. I'm not attacking freedom of speech.
I've been defending my right to stand up against someone who wants to pervert the truth.
That was the trailer for the film Denial. In a minute, we're going to go live to America and talk to the woman the film is all about, Professor Deborah Lipstadt. We're also going to talk to Lawrence Rees, whose current book is called The Holocaust, A New History. But first of all, we're going to talk, and this is a very unusual thing for us to do really here on the Jeremy Vine Show, we're going to talk about what happened on this programme on Holocaust Memorial Day. We did an interview with a woman who survived the genocide, and after that interview, the production team was shocked at the number of people who contacted the show questioning the factual basis of the Holocaust. And our reporter Tim Johns is here with me in the studio to tell us more about what happened that day. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Vanessa.
So what happened? It was only last month. What happened?
Well, it was on January the 27th, as you say. It was Holocaust Memorial Day. And as you mentioned, we featured this interview with Eve Kugler on the programme. Now, she's a Holocaust survivor who lost a huge number of family members during the Holocaust. She eventually escaped to France. We've got a fairly small production team here, and they answer the phones during the programme. As you might imagine, if you've listened to the programme, we hear a massive range of opinions on a daily basis. We hear views on all sorts of topics that are controversial, offensive, sometimes outrageous. But, you know, people are entitled to their opinions, and the production team have often, if you like, heard it all before.
Yeah.
And people rightly feel that they can phone this programme and tell us what they really think. Over the years, we have extensively covered the Holocaust, and this time I think something was different. The team was left genuinely shocked at the level and the frequency of negative comments. Some were what you could call mildly anti-Semitic in nature. Some were blatantly, strongly anti-Semitic. But some involved full-on Holocaust denial. People who openly questioned the well-established facts of the Holocaust. People who denied that any Jews were killed in death camps.
So what sorts of things were people saying?
Well, on Facebook, there were people calling for proof that the Holocaust happened. One man said, "When will this lie stop?" Another said, and I quote, "What a crock of..." insert expletive here. "You've been lied to for over 70 years. More and more evidence rises that blows the 6 million figure out of the water." He's referring there, of course, to the 6 million Jews who were killed. One guy called Chris said, "The Jews will try to shut us down by bringing up World War II or playing the anti-Semite card. Stop being a puppet to them." I'll just read you a couple more. Someone called Phil says, "They tested the so-called gas chambers and found no trace of any poison. Then they carried out autopsies on the dead and did not find one corpse that had died from poisoning. When you think about it, the only way the world knew about it was through the media." And one more. This one came through by text. This person said, "Stop with the lies. The Nazis never had death camps. They had labour camps where, unfortunately, thousands died of all races and religions, mainly due to malnutrition and disease. The only difference is the Jews made money out of the Holocaust."
Now, you say that the production team here at the Jeremy Vine Show are pretty seasoned and used to hearing and seeing comments that people might find unacceptable, were profoundly shocked by these responses. Is that because there was a greater volume of them than there usually is?
It's very hard to say because this is purely anecdotal, and I must stress that, but the mood amongst the team after the show was different to normal, and we do this day in, day out. You get a feel for that. I went round the office and I sort of interviewed them, if you like. I asked the team for their thoughts, and broadly speaking, they were just generally shocked at how brazen it was. It was almost as if the people saying it thought it was an acceptable thing to argue these days, and the team said this was staggering to them. One colleague who was looking through the social media that day said, "I'm rarely shocked by what I see. That changed this year. I've never seen so much brazen anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial being posted openly by people happy to use their real names." And another senior producer who's worked on this programme for more than a decade said, over the years he's covered Holocaust Memorial Day many times, but on this occasion we received more anti-Semitic remarks than he'd ever seen before, and he was hugely taken aback.
And it's always a difficult thing if you ask for an explanation for something indefensible like racism, but do you have any idea why this could be happening?
Where to begin? There are a huge number of possible reasons. For one, I think social media and the way that operates and facilitates this plays a huge part. But as I said earlier, one of the great things about this programme is that people feel they can ring it and tell us what they really think, and nothing is out of bounds. And perhaps in this so-called post-truth era of Brexit and Trump, perhaps that's just more true than ever.
Tim John, thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to go live to Professor Deborah Lipstadt. She is the American historian who wrote the book Denying the Holocaust and is the central character in the new film Denial. Professor, good afternoon.
Good morning for me, but good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. How long have you been studying the Holocaust and an expert on the Holocaust?
I've been studying the Holocaust since the early 1980s, and I would say I've been studying Holocaust denial since the late 1980s.
Tell us about David Irving, the Holocaust denier. What was it that first alerted you to his presence in the world?
Right. David Irving, I knew about David Irving. David Irving is a writer of historical works. I purposely did not call him a historian because I don't think he fills those bounds of what a historian is, but he has written many works on history, and they always were very edgy. They took what I would call a view that said, what did the Germans do right, what did the Allies do wrong? Mm-hmm. And in the late he began to flirt sort of with the deniers as his star dimmed amongst serious historians, and they all felt he had gone beyond the bounds, and he made claims like Hitler didn't know about the Holocaust, and when he found out about it, he tried to stop it. He became closer and closer with Holocaust deniers, appeared at their programs, and in the late 1980s declared himself to be a denier, not to believe in the gas. Well, he didn't declare himself to be a denier. He said, I don't believe there were gas chambers. I don't believe there was a plan to kill the Jews. I don't believe Hitler had anything to do with it, and I think the Jews are lying. So essentially he was denying the Holocaust, but he refused to say he was a Holocaust denier. I was writing my book at that time about Holocaust denial, and I devoted, I would say, 300 words to him in the book, saying that he was the most dangerous of deniers because he knew the facts and he bent them. He wasn't one of those simpletons, some of whom may have called your program, who simply took what was said, but he knew and he twisted the information. And that, when the book appeared in the United Kingdom, he sued me for libel for calling him a Holocaust denier.
And this is the subject of the film, Denial, is
the film.
His suing of you, and you're finding that the case had to be heard over here in London in the High Court. You're having to decamp over here to this country, engaging Anthony Julius and his team as your legal representatives, and what happens during the trial. And your character representing you in this film says, obviously, the outcome of this trial is absolutely pivotal, not just for you and your career, but for the history of the Holocaust itself. Because if
That's exactly right.
Right. And explain
exactly right.
why it was so important. This was a case that wasn't being fought just for you.
Right. It was far beyond me. I mean, he could have seriously harmed me, attached my property and things like that, but the stakes were much bigger than that. If he had won in the court, and the court had declared, yes, Deborah Lipstadt libeled David Irving when she called him a Holocaust denier, what the court would be saying is that David Irving's version of the Holocaust is a genuine version. And as I said earlier, what is that version? There were no gas chambers. There was no plan to kill the Jews. Hitler was the best friend, and I quote, the best friend the Jews had in Germany. And all this is rubbish made up by Jews.
And so we have the film. I don't want to, give away the punchline, but it's a historical fact what happened to you and what happened to the court case. I'm
willing to be a spoiler because I went to see the film the first time.
Yeah.
I knew the ending very well, and I was on the edge of my chair. We won a tremendous victory.
You won a tremendous victory. Now
it's considered one of the most damning libel judgments in British history. The judge said he's a liar, he's a racist, he's an anti-Semite, a Holocaust denier, and he does all this deliberately. And I think the thing, and I was amazed by the story your producers told about what happened after your January 27th program.
Yes.
I took notes, and I'm going to write about this because it's just mind-boggling. But I think the thing your viewers have to understand, 2 points I'd like to make.
Yes.
One, in my defense, what we did, we didn't prove what happened, but we proved what David Irving said didn't happen. We disproved his arguments. We followed his footnotes back to the sources. And with a team headed by Richard Evans, Cambridge University Regis Professor, now president of Wilson College, and other prominent historians, we followed his footnotes, and every time he said, I have a document which proves that this didn't happen, or this didn't happen, or the Jews are lying about this, we looked at the document, and what we found was a deliberate distortion, manipulation of evidence, invention, adding people who were at a meeting who weren't there, changing the sequence, changing the date, so that we proved that all the arguments that this man made are based on lies. And that was really seminal to what I call hardcore Holocaust denial, those who deny that it happened, because we showed that it's all based on lies. I can tell you the Earth is flat, and I have a document to prove it, but the document won't prove it because the Earth is not flat. So that is what we did. And the other point I want to make is that and I think in the introduction, you mentioned, you alluded to this. You said, it's hard to take on prejudice, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, whatever it might be, with facts, because it's an obsession. It's a craziness. Holocaust deniers are at their heart anti-Semites. And even though one of your callers might have said, they're going to call us anti-Semites, well, we call them anti-Semites because they are anti-Semites, and there's no question about that. And usually they're racist as well.
Why should it be, do you think, Professor, that following your landmark case, when you would have thought that maybe a line would be drawn in the sand and there'd be no more Holocaust denial because in the High Court of this country it had been decreed that this was falsification, deliberate lies, racism of a blatant kind, and every argument was utterly destroyed and annihilated by your team, and the judge found absolutely for you and absolutely against David Irving. So how could it be then that the Jeremy Vine show would attract, that level of vituperative Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism in 2017? Is there such a thing as an explanation for that kind of behaviour?
You know, your question is a perfect question. Is there such a thing as an explanation? I don't think so, because as I said a moment ago, you know, whether you're talking about racism or you're talking about anti-Semitism or you're talking about homophobia, they're prejudices. And think about the etymology of the word prejudice: prejudge. Don't confuse me with the facts. I've made up my mind. These are people who are conspiracy theorists par excellence, and everything they look at the world, the prism through which their view of the world is refracted is an anti-Semitic prism in this case. So to answer them logically just doesn't work. And you say 2017, I speak to you from the United States. I happen to be speaking to you from Texas, where I am today giving a lecture.
Yes.
And we are in the midst of a battle against fake news and alternative facts. Alternative facts is a shorter word for alternative facts. We call them lies. And people in the highest offices of this land making things up, saying them blatantly. We had a campaign which gave great comfort to racists and Islamophobes and anti-Semites, and a refusal to condemn it. These people are feeling, and I think during Brexit you had the same thing in your country, and maybe not as high level.
No, not at that level. May I ask you one final question, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure.
And it's a very simple yet obviously very important question. Can we say for certain that there were 6 million Jewish people killed in the Holocaust? Without being simplistic, do we, for example, have names and addresses of those people who were killed?
We have population figures before and population figures after. We have Nazi records. We have reports, how many people were shot in which place. We have the capacity of the gas chambers. We can't say explicitly, though I have to say there's research being done now by a Catholic priest in France, Father Patrick Dubois, and he's going to sites of shootings, which suggests that the number may be higher than 6 million. It could be 5.2, it could be 5.8, it could be 6.4, but we can say without any doubt this is the best documented genocide in the world. We have the evidence of the survivors, one of whom was on your show, of the bystanders who saw the trains going into the camps day after day, filled with people coming out empty. And most of all, we have the evidence of the perpetrators, the people who said, I did it. Your next guest, Professor Rees, has done terrific research in that regard and can speak to that as well.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us today, Professor Deborah Lipstadt. Now, you heard Professor Deborah Lipstadt talk about my next guest, Lawrence Rees, author of The Holocaust, A New History, and actually a reef of different books about the Holocaust. Welcome to the studio. Good afternoon to you.
Hi.
I mean, we've just had, for example, this from Niall, one of our listeners, who says denying the Holocaust should be a criminal offence. Do you think there's any worth in it becoming a criminal offence?
I used to think not. And I'm kind of in the process of changing my mind about that. And I think that's because of the kinds of things you've been talking about here. I remember, for instance, like growing up in the early 70s, I remember there was a whole lot of sexism, there was a whole lot of racism, there was a whole lot of homophobia, which was kind of around. And that's all changed for my children. And it's changed, I think, primarily because of legislation. You can't say these things. So I'm beginning... I never wanted to go down this route, but I'm beginning to go down it round.
Really? You're thinking that it should be made a criminal offence? As I believe it is in Germany, is it?
Yeah. I used to think it was okay because the facts are out there and it's obvious. But actually, having had experience of Holocaust deniers myself, seeing what's now happening with this in the world with this whole fake news thing, I think it's extremely dangerous in ways now it wasn't before.
I mean, Professor Lipstadt said that one of the most valuable sources of information about the Holocaust is provided by the Nazis themselves, who were meticulous annotators, filers of information, record keepers. So when people say, let's have names and addresses, the chances are that they have provided names and addresses, aren't there?
Up to a point. I mean, the fact is that there are, as she says, there are a number of documents we can look at in this. For example, with, as I say in the book, a number of people who died in what was called the Operation Reinhard camps, places like Treblinka. at the end of 1942, they did itemise that as a number. But overall, they were pretty careful about this. But the fact is...
May I ask you, so at Treblinka, what is the number?
Well, for example, we don't know for sure. It could be it could be as low as 700,000. It could be as high as 900,000.
We have to remember when you say as low as 700,000, you are talking about 700,000 women and babies.
Of course. I say as low because that's the minimum that we can absolutely know. And she says, we know that primarily people were killed there from the Warsaw Ghetto. We know how many, there are numbers and estimates. And so... For example, Dr. Piper at the Auschwitz Museum has devoted his life to giving as accurate a number as possible of the people who died in Auschwitz. And he's a great scholar, and he's written extensively on this, so we know. But what we can't do, and will never do, is have 6 million names and addresses.
No, but we will have a goodly number of names and addresses.
But the very fact we're even having this discussion is so ludicrous, because the fact is that we know within these parameters for certain this happened.
And explain how you can be certain, because there still will be people listening who are just about to send a text or an email to say that they don't believe that the Holocaust happened, or they feel it's been exaggerated or somehow appropriated by, as they put it, the Jews. So when you say this is ludicrous, we know it happened, what do you say to them?
First of all, so I'm going to say read the book, but that's 200,000 words, so they're not going to do that. For example, I have met a man called Oscar Groening, who we managed to get to do the very first interview thanks to a brilliant German journalist called Dr. Frank Stucker, unfortunately dead now, but a brilliant German journalist who worked with me on the series I made about Auschwitz. We had on camera the very first interview with a member of the SS who worked at Auschwitz, and he talked about what he'd seen.
What had he seen?
Well, he'd seen the gas chambers, he'd seen the crematorium pits, he knew exactly what was happening. And here's the incredible bleak irony. The reason he decided to give us this extraordinary, historically valuable interview was because he was a philatelist after he retired as a personnel officer after the war. And at his philately club, he met a Holocaust denier. And he said to the denier, hang on, that's wrong, I was there. And they got into an argument. So here's the irony. He appeared on television to tell us what happened because of being motivated by a Holocaust denier.
I mean, this is recent history, so many people listening will have met a Holocaust survivor, or will have met somebody who has met a Holocaust survivor, or will remember the Nuremberg trials, or will have read the transcripts of the Nuremberg trials, or seen the incredible film footage of the Allies liberating the gas chambers. So people have seen with their own eyes and heard with their own ears. It's not that it was so long ago no one remembers. There are Holocaust survivors alive now who were literally there. So then how do you think this level of denial can possibly have flourished?
I think there's, as Professor Lipstadt said, there's a whole basket of reasons here. First is anti-Semitism. Obviously, anti-Semitism is not new. It's been around for 2,000 years.
And let's just make it clear what that is. It means hating a Jew for being Jewish.
It believes it's that, but it's also a belief that there is a worldwide conspiracy of Jews secretly operating in the world to promote their own Jewishness and Judaism and do down everybody else. It's a whole raft of things at different levels, but essentially it's an absolute, as you say, hatred of Jews.
And if anybody listening is thinking that's right, there is a worldwide conspiracy of Jews who are somehow promoting a Jewish cause. I mean, you're laughing, but some people do take this seriously and they do believe it. So what would you say to them?
Well, what you've got to understand is you can't say anything to them. And the reason you can't is because there are a number of people who believe we didn't land on the moon. There are a number of people who believe the Earth's flat. And the fact is that I think there's a number of people who believe UFOs are regularly landing. And I think that there's something in the human psyche, even more than anti-Semitism, that wants to believe in this kind of ludicrous conspiracy.
Let me read you this, for example. This has come from Spike in Thornbury in South Gloucestershire. And Spike says, I'm not a denier, but I know the 6 million figure is wrong. It has been picked to fit in with the Torah. I reckon it's 4 million, give or take. What does that mean? Do you know?
Well, I can't believe you're even reading this stuff out. I mean, the fact is, I know it's true. What do you mean I know it's true? He's studied it, has he? All these people, Christopher Browning, Professor Christopher Browning, all these people at the Auschwitz Museum, they've been wasting their times, have they? Because he knows it. I mean, it's nonsensical.
You know, and if you visit Yad Vashem, the memorial, you will see the teeth, the fillings, the gold fillings extracted from the teeth of the people who were killed. You will see shoes, and you will see bags, and you will see hair, won't you? And
but as I say, if you did a program about UFOs, you're going to get a whole load of people saying they've seen UFOs.
Let's go on the phone to Janet. Janet's in Christchurch in Dorset. Hi, Janet. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon. Yes, my father was one of the first in to liberate Belsen, and he lived with that nightmare for 5 years. He screamed in his sleep for years afterwards for what he'd seen, and I also saw photographs of it. I'm 80 years old now, and I was also based in Hona, Belsen, with the army for 2 or 3 years, and my dad would never, ever come out to see me there. He refused.
Janet, when you say that your father was one of the liberators of Bergen-Belsen, the death camp, and he screamed in the middle of the night for years afterwards because of what he saw, would you mind telling us anything that he told you that he saw himself with his own eyes when he was there?
Well, remember, I was only 8 years old, but he did tell us, my sister and I, she was 3 years younger than me, but we couldn't understand why he was crying out in his sleep, and my mum tried to explain, and in the end Dad sat us down and he explained to us that he could not believe that what he saw, human beings like my sister and I, children, grown-ups, literally skin and bone, and the mounds and the dead bodies that hadn't been buried lying around, and it was up to they were so frightened when they saw my father amongst all the army people going in. They thought they were going to be shot. They didn't realise that they were being liberated.
And Janet, when you hear of people denying that the Holocaust ever happened, when your father was there liberating a concentration camp and he told you about it, you heard him screaming in the night afterwards, how do you feel about the people who would want to phone a radio programme and say there was no such thing as the Holocaust? How do you feel about that?
I feel very angry, and all I can say is they're sick. What's going on in the world today? You can see what people are doing to other people. Well, that was what happened then, except it was, I think, even worse.
Janet, thank you so much for calling. We hugely appreciate it. Let's go to Patrick. Patrick's on the line in Birmingham. Hello, Patrick. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vanessa. I'd just like to say my wife and I visited Auschwitz on the 27th of this month. My wife's always wanted to go there for the last 30 years. We went there. Anybody that wishes to tonight should go and visit Auschwitz and then spend another 2 hours at Birkenau, which is Auschwitz 2. These camps were not designed as labour camps. These were designed as killing machines. In Auschwitz 1, we went and seen a small gas chamber and 2 ovens, which they failed to blow up because I believe during the end of the war they were using it as a bomb shelter because it had a good, strong concrete roof. But then we went to Birkenau, Auschwitz 2. The size of it, you cannot believe it. It's like 100 football pitches. There's a few shacks standing because they were never designed to stand for 70 years. But in the distance, all you can see is the chimney stacks, one end on one end of the shack and one on the other, and they just disappear till they just disappear into nothing. It's horrible. We're seeing the glasses, the cases, the shoes. These were not designed as labour camps. These were designed to use people up and discard them, and then whatever's left afterwards, the Germans would then use. What I can't understand is how people can deny this. Go and see. If you can't go and see the film. It's all true. Anybody that can deny this ever happened needs to go and visit a psychiatrist because, in my opinion, they don't deserve. I do not understand where they're coming from. I don't understand why they can deny it. I'm a Roman Catholic. I have no affiliation to the Jewish Church or anything like that. All I can say, it's horrible. It was solemn. It was something I'll never forget and something my wife will never forget.
Patrick.